I don't want to belabor the point, but I feel like I would be pretty deaf to the Spirit to not recognize that He's saying pretty much the same thing all service. And so what I had planned, I'm not going to do just because. And I woke up this morning and I kept sensing something in my heart and in my spirit, and I wrestled with it because it's not anything I had planned or prepped, but as service is going on, it just kind of seems like God is saying the same thing. So let me just define a word for you, and then we're going to read a story from the Bible and give opportunity to respond. A victim is someone who has suffered as a result of someone else's actions or belief, or as a result of unpleasant circumstances. And I think what we kept hearing this morning when our youth were testifying and with the Life's Healing Choices testimonies, what we kept hearing is we could all be in a place of being a victim. Right? We could all live our lives as a victim, or we could choose to live our lives as a victor. Really, it is that simple. And you think about, not to oversimplify it, but you think about the word victim and victor, that's very similar. V-I-C-T starts them. The only difference is the last two letters. The victim is I am, it's about me. Victor, it's O-R, meaning there's another option. Right? Right? Victim, it's about me, I can't get out of this. Or victor, there's another option, and his name is Jesus. And He can deliver me out of this, He can walk me through this, He can see me to a place of victory, and I don't have to continue in the mess. I don't have to continue to wallow, whatever's going on. We've all been victimized in one way or another. Whether we want to admit it or not, sometimes we've talked about this a lot with Dad. I thought we had moved on, and I'm not revisiting that. But for whatever reason, since we've been here, God keeps bringing us back to this place of coming to victory and coming to a place of healing, because there's been a lot of junk levied against the people of God for so long, and we've sat back and we've taken it, and we've thought, well, let's just get along and do the best we can until we get to heaven. But I'm tired of waiting till heaven. I want to see heaven on earth. I don't believe we have to live as victims on earth and finally realize victory in heaven. I believe we can have victory now. And so I don't want any of us to live and operate under a victim mentality any longer that says, well, and we say things like, well, under the circumstances, I guess I'm okay. I got a question. Why are you putting yourself under circumstances? The only thing I want to be under is the authority of Jesus Christ. So let's just look at a story in 2 Kings chapter 7. I'm going to read like all the chapters, like 20 verses. And I don't got anything planned. I might just read it and give an altar call. I don't know. But I feel like God is speaking, and so I don't want to get in the way of that and shift gears with that. But Elisha said, hear the word of the Lord. Thus says the Lord, tomorrow about this time, a seah of flour will be sold for a shekel, and 2 seahs of barley for a shekel at the gate of Samaria. Then the captain on whose hand the king leaned said to the man of God, if the Lord himself should make windows in heaven, could this thing be? But he says, you shall see it with your eyes, but you shall not eat of it. So in other words, Elisha gave a prophetic word. He goes, everything's about to change. Right? And we made some prophetic declarations last week and over the last few weeks that everything's changing. But in the midst of that, we have to decide, will we watch the change happen from our seat, or will we get up and be a part of the change that happens? Right? Isn't that the challenge before us? Are we going to watch life happen, or are we going to be a part of it as it happens? And so now there were 4 men who were lepers, victims, at the entrance to the gate, and they said to one another, why are we sitting here until we die? If we say, let us enter the city, the famine is in the city, we'll die there. If we sit here, we also die. So now come, let us go over to the camp of the Syrians. If they spare our lives, we shall live. If they kill us, we just die. One way or another, right? So they arose at twilight to go to the camp of the Syrians, but when they came to the edge of the camp of the Syrians, behold, there was no one there. For the Lord had made the army of the Syrians hear the sound of chariots and of horses. The sound of a great army, so that they said to one another, behold, the king of Israel has hired against us the kings of the Hittites and the kings of Egypt to come against us. So they fled away in the twilight and abandoned their tents, their horses and their donkeys, leaving the camp as it was, and they fled for their lives. When these lepers came to the edge of the camp, they went into a tent and ate and drank, and they carried off silver and gold and clothing and went and hid them. Then they came back and entered another tent and carried off things from it and went and hid them. Let's stop there for just a moment. So you got these lepers. They're sitting there. There's 4 of them. They're victims. They got leprosy. I looked it up. It means they had leprosy. A skin-eating disease, basically, that nobody wants to deal with. And as lepers, in culture, it said you had to avoid and separate yourself from everybody. You had to be inward, not outward. You had to be insulated and isolated. And if anybody got near you, you had to, oh, I'm a leper. You had to declare your problems. You couldn't interact with society. You couldn't touch people. Nobody could touch you. You were wearing an ongoing scarlet letter, so to speak. And so they're sitting there, they're like, listen, fellas, one of them got this bright idea. He went through Healing Choices. And he told the other 3, why are we sitting here until we die? Why do we have to sit here in our leprosy? Why do we have to sit here in our mess? Why do we have to sit here in our junk and hope eventually it gets better once we die? Why don't we do something about our situation? We're sitting here, we've got leprosy, we're starving, there's nothing happening. If we go into the city, we can't do that, they'll kill us. If we sit here, nothing's going to change, they're going to kill us. So how about we go to the enemy's camp? How about we do that? And if they kill us, oh well, we're going to die anyway. So they had a choice. We can sit here as victims. We can sit here in our mess. We can sit here and complain. We can sit here with wishful thinking, or we can get up and take the bull by the horns and do something about our lives. And I think that's exactly where God is calling the church today. And He's saying, what are you going to do with the situation you're dealing with? What are you going to do with the hand you've been dealt? You going to complain about it, or are you going to make something of it? I know that's not pleasant to consider. It's not pleasant to think about, but I think the die is being cast, the rubber's meeting the road, and God's saying it's time for the church of God to put up or shut up. And it's time that we do something and step away from victim and step into victor and walk it out. Because they get up, and you know what happens? God got on their side. You know what messes with me about this story? God didn't act till they did. Sometimes we sit back and we're like, well, I'm in this mess. God knows how to find me, knows where to find me, and if He wants me free, He'll come find me. He'll come tap me on the shoulder. I don't know who ever taught that, but that's not in any version. Not in the original Hebrew or Greek. You look it up, you won't find it. But it's real easy, isn't it? And we sit back and we think, well, you know, I'll just wait until the sweet by and by. And, you know, God never intended. Listen, Jesus came that we might have what? And life to what extent? Not abundantly, more abundantly. But you know what many of us do? We settle for existence. We're like, well, I just want to exist until I get to heaven. Then the abundant life starts. No, on earth as it is in heaven. Many times we deal with things that we don't have to deal with because nobody's ever told us we don't have to deal with them. I'm telling you, you don't have to deal with them. You don't have to continue in that place and that you're like, well, but this happened to me and this happened. And I'm not downplaying or belittling any of the trauma, any of the hurts, the habits, the hang-ups. I'm not overshadowing or trying to minimize or dismiss that. But I'm telling you, Jesus Christ has come to give victory over all things. And there's nothing more powerful than Christ in you. And you do not have, listen, we don't live with the events that happen to us. We live with the memory of those events. And what we need is the Lord to renew our mind and help us to see from His perspective and help us to know and to understand that He can bring us out and bring us through and make us victorious on the other side. We don't have to continue to be caught up and held captive by the things. Jesus Christ came to bring us freedom. And these guys says, why do we sin? What are we doing? And that's what I've been stirring in my heart all morning. I'm like, God, why are we just sitting around waiting for it to be over? Why are we thinking, woo, hey, a Republican won again? Who cares? Jesus is king no matter what. Am I thankful for whatever? Yeah. Did I vote? Yes. But I'm not an American Christian. I'm a Christian who lives in America. I don't want a nationalized religion. I want Jesus Christ and His kingdom to come. And I want to operate not according to what the government can do, not according to what society can do, but I want what He can do to be that which drives me and motivates me and leads me. Because listen to me, there's not a mayor, a senator, a president, or any other elected official that can bring you freedom, but Jesus Christ can. And these guys are like, what are we doing? It's time we get up and do something. And so they start walking. And the Bible says the Syrians heard an army coming. 4 lepers don't sound like an army. Some of y'all are thinking, well, who am I? I'm so insignificant. Trust me. It don't matter how insignificant any one of us might be, because when God steps in, that significance becomes far bigger than you could ever imagine. Remember that song we used to sing way back in the day, Me and Jesus? We are a majority. Some of y'all looking around, you never heard that one, did you? I just aged myself. But you get growing up in church. I probably heard that one in the womb or something. But they get up and they begin to move toward the camp. And the Syrians are like, oh my gosh, they got this massive army. We got to get out. So these lepers, they walk in, they go into this tent. And they're like, look at this. And they're eating. They've eaten for days. There's a famine. They're like, if we go in the city, there's a famine there. It's not going to work. So they go to the enemy's camp, and there's all this food. I mean, it's like Thanksgiving. And they're gorging themselves, and they find silver and gold and all this cool stuff, and they take it back, and they hide it. And they're like, I wonder if this could happen again. So they go back, and there's another tent. And for the sake of time, I won't read the rest of the story. But it dawns on them at one point, wait a minute. Why are we the only ones enjoying this? Why don't we tell our own people what's available? Because you know what we need to understand? There are people in your life, they need you to be set free so you can lead them to freedom too. Yes. There are people in your life that need you to get up and move beyond the victim to victor, because what you find in victory, you're going to help them find in victory too. They're back there shaking and quaking in their boots, wishing they could somehow beat the enemy's army. But if somebody would stand up and begin to move, and God interacts, and God steps in on your behalf, and God brings you to a place of victory, then you're going to have an opportunity to share it. So they go back and they tell everybody, hey, guess what? And at first, the Israelites were like, I ain't going to listen to these boneheads. I don't think it says that in the original, but it seems right to me. Because who's going to listen to a leper? And some of you are thinking, well, who's going to listen to me? How can I make a difference? What's it going to matter? Is anybody even going to pay attention? If they know where I've been, if they know where I am, quit putting yourself where you've been. Jesus is not the great I was. He's the great I am. Who was, who is, and who is to come. Yes, but he's current. He's fresh. And what he's done in you, and if the Son has set you free. And so I know the thought sometimes is like, what do I have to give? And these guys, they go back and they're like, listen, here's what's happening. The Syrians are gone. We can go have anything we want. The battle is already won. You see, but many times we sit back and we think, well, at least in my victim state, I know what to expect. Did you know your state of victimization, of bondage, or whatever you want to call it, can become an extreme comfort zone? Like a cocoon. And we're like, well, this is at least is familiar. This at least makes sense. This I can understand. This is my lot in life. What other choice do I have? You do have another choice. Because sometimes you sit back and you think, man, if I step out of this, I don't know. It's easier to deal with the enemy I know than the one I don't. But when you stand up and you decide to step out and do something different and take a stand and take a step, they stepped toward the enemy. And God's like, oh, I like this. Oh, I like this. And then they go and they tell their friends, hey, everybody, listen. It's all there for the taking. I mean, all these tents, they got food, they got clothing, they got stuff. It's awesome. And everyone's like, no, not true. So they sent a few to spy it out to make sure. Yeah, it's true. Remember the fella that told Elisha, psh, never going to happen. Can't happen. The king gave him a job. Can you guard the gate? Sure, no problem, king. He got trampled. Whoops. So don't worry about the naysayers. They have a way of being dealt with. I'm not saying we want anybody to be trampled. Don't misunderstand me. But I'm saying I do not want to allow anyone or anything to stop me from pursuing and receiving all that God has for me. I don't want anybody to stand in the way. I don't want anybody to tell me it can't be done. I don't want anybody to, listen, we could go on and on and on about all the things that are wrong and what people are saying is wrong, but I want you to know something. What God says must be the final say. He must have the final authority. He has spoken it. That's all that matters. And he says you're the head and not the tail. He says you're above and not beneath. He says you are more than conquerors. He says nothing will separate you from the love of God. He says greater is he who is in you than he that is in the world. He says no weapon formed against you will prosper, and every tongue that rises in judgment shall be condemned. He says when the enemy comes in like a flood, the Spirit of the Lord will raise up a standard against him. On and on and on we can go. And he calls us victorious. Not because we win a battle, but because we know the victorious one. Guess what? Victim is on you. Victor is on him. So I can trust me or I can trust him. And I found many times over, he's a lot better to trust than Rodney is. I heard too many amens on that one. Victim? Oh, but you just don't know, brother. Or victor? Even if I do know, He's good. He's trustworthy. He's faithful. He's true. In all these things, we are more than conquerors. Micah, he's more trustworthy than Chuck Norris. Somebody asked John Wayne what he thought of Chuck Norris. He goes, never heard of her. It's the Duke, man. Sorry, you'll catch that next week. That's okay. But we have a choice, do we not? Victim, I am. I'm caught in this. I'm a mess. Well, it's what happened to me when I was this, when I was that. And we can all relive. Our mind has two basic functions: replay and pre-play. Memory or imagination. And the enemy loves to play in both of those. He wants you to replay. He wants you to replay all the bad. And he wants to make sure he controls the narrative. And it causes depression. It causes sadness. It causes fear. It causes, oh yeah, I remember. But the Bible says we can have our minds renewed. Be not conformed any longer to the patterns of this world, but be ye transformed. How? By the renewing of your mind. Or pre-play. Imagination. Oh, it happened before. It's going to happen again. I'm anxious. I'm concerned. I'm frantic. Why say that we're here until we die? Because I don't know what else to do. Pastor, you're weird. I know. But I really am trying to help you. Because I, for one, as we have traveled around and gone to different churches over the years and preached in other countries, and we watched people, this is something that's so common in so many places. The victim mentality that says, well, and what's mind-boggling to me is when somebody tells their story, somebody else has one that's worse. And we compete over our testimonies more than our testimonies. Well, I know it was bad for you, but listen how bad it was for me. And we exalt and glorify the enemy. And we put ourselves in this box that says, this is the lot I'm given, but the Lord knows my heart. And God's up there saying, how about you put your heart into action and make a different choice? And say, as for me and my house, I'm not going to serve myself. I'm not going to serve my feelings and my emotions anymore. I'm not going to serve my doubts anymore. I'm going to serve the Lord, and I'm going to trust Him. And I'm not going to, why sit we here till we die? What? Let's do something different. Sometimes we think, I just can't. The enemy's working too hard. When the lepers were sitting there, the enemy was doing nothing to them. Ouch. When they got up and began to move, the enemy still didn't do anything to them, but he ran from them. I wonder what might happen if we as the people of God had that same question. What are we waiting for? It's essentially the question, right? Why sit we here till we die? What are we waiting for? What's the point? What do we have to lose? What do we have to lose? But we got everything to gain. I think it's time that we become sold out, all in. We say, I'm choosing Him. I'm choosing His victory. I'm not giving in to that anymore. Have bad things happen to me? Yes. But I choose to not let that be my story. I'm not going to be defined by what has happened to me. I'm going to be defined by who He says that I am. I'm not going to allow myself to be in that box anymore. I'm not going to increase the size of the box. I'm not going to open the box, get out and celebrate on Sunday and get back in it on Monday. I'm going to go to the Holy Ghost compactor and crush the box. And let Him bring me to a place of true victory.